on Fridays. I'm McCauley, and I'm filming this episode at the very beginning of a brand new calendar year. So we're in the early stages of January, and I want to introduce you to two saints in this episode. Both of them have feast days in January, and both of them have a lot in common. They're early church monastics or monks. I'm talking about Antony of Egypt, and that is right, it's Antony without an H, although a lot of books will spell it as Anthony with an H, but Antony of Egypt, whose feast day is January 2nd, and then I want to talk about Basil the Great, St. Basil the Great, whose feast day is January 17th. Now, again, these are two early monastics in the Christian tradition, and monasticism comes from the Greek word monos, which means alone, because you go out by yourself to be alone. The closest approximation we have to this in our day is a retreat. If you've been on a retreat, you go away and you spend time by yourself. And what's the purpose of this retreat? Well, much like the monks, it was to get away from your normal routine, to get away from the people you would normally associate with, to get away from those things that are going to distract you from a prayerful relationship with God. So simply defined, monasticism is a movement away from the world to pursue holiness through prayer. That's all it is. And again, that's what we do with a retreat. We move away from our normal routine, our normal world, and we try to pursue holiness. We do a lot of introspection and a lot of, self cleansing, if you will, thinking of where we're at and praying for God's grace to have a new vision as we go forth from that place and apply those lessons in the real world. So monasticism is very important in basically every major religion, not just Christianity, but in the early centuries of Christianity, monasticism plays a very fundamental key role. And it's going to start out mainly in the deserts of northern Africa. And that's where these two gentlemen are going to hang out and going to make history, if you will. Antony, very quickly, let's start with Antony. Again, his feast day is January 2nd. Antony is going to be the son of very wealthy parents who both die. And he is left a fortune. And he basically gives it away. He gives it away to help support his little sister so that she could be taken care of. And he goes out into the desert because he hears the passage from the gospel where Jesus says, in order to follow him, you have to give up everything, give to the poor, and follow Christ. And so what he does is, he says, I can't die for Christ anymore because persecution against Christianity is pretty much waning at this point. But he can suffer like Christ did when Christ went into the desert. We know this in Mark's gospel, for instance. It starts with Jesus' baptism, and he's driven out into the desert to be tempted by the devil. And so Antony takes that as a message for him for his life, and he goes out into the desert, and he lives in these cracks and crevices and caves and his little self-made hut, like a lean-to, and he's out there by himself for years. But people start to look at him and they know of him, and they see him as somebody who is somehow connected spiritually to God in ways that they aren't. And so they go out to him in droves. They go out to him and they seek his advice. They want his counsel. They ask him for his prayers. Can you pray for my family, my sick relative, whatever the case is? And they ask in some cases for him to settle a dispute that they might have with their neighbor, because again, he's considered wise. This is, by our standards, they'd seem like, radical, weird hippies or something. But Antony, who went out into the desert, people saw him as somehow closer to the divine, and so they sought his presence. And so many people wanted to be like him that women, it was too unsafe for you to do this, but men would go out by the hundreds, by themselves, into little caves and into lean-tos and into little shelters that they would build, and they would pursue this monastic lifestyle. Now, what was he doing out there? It's said that Antony was battling demons, much like Christ did when he was tempted by Satan 3 times. We know that Antony battled demons, and you can look at that literally, that he literally fought demons. Or you can look at it as a way for us today. How do we battle those things, those demons, those things that haunt us, those things that challenge us, the sins that we give into? Can we pray to God for grace to overcome them, to battle them? But that's Antony in a nutshell. Now, because of all these men that are going out into the deserts, what happens is they're very loosely organized. In fact, there's very little organization. They all have their own way of praying, and they all have their own way of living their lives. This is where we come to our second great monastic father, and his name again is Basil the Great, whose feast day is January 17th. And Basil is the one who's going to see all these hundreds and possibly thousands of men out by themselves. And he is, I think, one of the greatest quotes attributed to anybody in Christian history that's attributed to Basil. He says, "If you live alone, whose feet will you wash?" In other words, he's telling these men, if you go out by yourself, you can't serve. Yes, Christ went into the desert to be tempted, but he also served. He washed feet at the Last Supper as an example of that service, of humility. And if we live by ourselves, we can't do those things. So he called these men together and said, if you're going to be out in the desert, make yourselves a community. Make yourselves a monastery. And you can have your alone time in your cell and in prayer time and stuff still, but you should live in community so you can serve each other and see Christ's presence in each other. And that was very important to Basil. The idea of serving and being in community was vital to the monastic movement moving forward. Basil's the one who sets that stage. So subsequent monastic orders, like the kinds of the Celtic priests and monks in Ireland, started by Patrick and St. Bridget for the women, they were influenced by this. People like St. Benedict, who is really the father of Western monasticism, is going to take his example from Basil. The idea of living in community is so important. So when we reflect on these two great men and their feast days in the month of January, it's important to think about some of those lessons that we get from them. You know, what is it? What demons do I have in my life? What things can I work on? Can I be better at? How can I improve my life and my relationship with God and then by extension others? What things do I need to abstain from, to give up from? What things can I do without? When I figuratively move away from the world, you know, we can't stop going to work. We have families, but can I take little retreats, little monastic moments away? When I'm driving in the car, can I for 1 week turn off the radio and not listen to any podcasts or any music or anything and just focus on prayer? Looking for those little moments is something that's a lesson from the monastics, and it can really do wonders in terms of strengthening us to overcome temptations, to battle those demons that we face. And then the other lesson I'd say is, again, to remind ourselves in those little communities that we're a part of, be it school or work or families, friends, how am I serving those people? How am I washing feet? How am I being humble in the face of it, within the context of those relationships? Because ultimately that's what we're called to. So again, two great monastic fathers, two great monastic leaders that the church celebrates in the month of January. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope it's given you some inspiration to maybe try to live your own little monastic moments when you can, to look for them 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, just to recharge your spiritual batteries a little bit and learn the lessons from these wonderful men. So thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to share this content, that'd be great. Very grateful that you tune in to Fish on Fridays. It'd be great if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel and maybe follow us on Facebook. Feel free to leave comments in either of those platforms as well. Either way, we're glad you watched. So thank you so much. Until next time, be good to each other and God bless.